Excellent stuff, excellent stuff. So, cheers for going through that with us all, Thomas. I'm going to blitz through some slides now and get on to the demo. So, as I mentioned, SUSE Manager has been traditionally based upon upstream spacewalk. It had this horrible client from Red Hat that was just not very good. It had none of the benefits of Salt. It was an absolute nightmare. Anyone who's ever used it will know it's awful. It's horrible. It's a pain, nightmare to set up. It's also not very good at pushing things to clients, maintaining things like states that we talked about, or anything like that. Checks in once every hour, for example, by default, and in today's world, that's just not very good enough. Now, if we built SUSE Manager today, and we based our new version of SUSE Manager on that same stack, I'm fairly sure I know what Linus would say to SUSE, pretty much, if we did. It's that awful. So we integrated Salt. SUSE Manager is a Salt master. It brings all of the features that Thomas just talked about. Nothing's lost through using it through SUSE Manager. You may not be able to see everything in the SUSE Manager web interface that you can do with the Salt master, but the features are there for you to use in the back end if you so wish. And we think that makes SUSE Manager pretty awesome, to be fair. We're the only ones in the marketplace to be doing this, and the only ones to be doing it with Salt as well. And I'm not going to run through that. I think Thomas has done a very good job of taking care of that for me. So, as I just said, SUSE Manager's a Salt master. We put our own SUSE Manager stuff in a specific directory. And from SUSE's perspective, we support Salt on SLES 11, SP3, SP4, as well as SLES 12, SP1, SP2, and obviously everything going forward, as well as Red Hat 6 and 7, and CentOS 6 and 7 as well, is what you can phone us for support with. But obviously, you can run Salt minions on any architecture or client that it supports, which is a lot. So this here just kind of gives an overview of what you could do with SUSE Manager, and this is available in the web UI. So what we can do is we can create a state or go grab a state that someone else has already written from GitHub, for example, import that into SUSE Manager. And in SUSE Manager, we have the concept of system groups. These are logical groupings for whatever you decide you create them. It could be for web servers, for every server in a specific data center, for example. We could then apply that state to that group, and Salt will take care of the rest and go off and apply all of that. Within SUSE Manager itself, we use Salt in a number of ways internally behind the scenes, but you can use states and all of the features Thomas has just talked about within the web UI for all of the things listed up behind me. So, roadmap and future. So, current version of SUSE Manager is 3.0.4, which was released a couple of weeks ago as a point update. SUSE Manager 3.1 is coming out very soon. We're in beta at the moment, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when I go through my demo. The things we're going for 3.1 are obviously support for all the main versions of SLES. Again, we've brought in a major web interface refresh. Before 3.1, SUSE Manager looked pretty much the same as Spacewalk or Red Hat Satellite 5. We've overhauled it, brought in a modern web stack, and that's going to enable a lot of the future things that we see there around visualization of your data center as well. SUSE Manager 3.2 is pretty far out there in the future. And these are the things on the board that we've locked down at the moment. We're looking at things like log management, for example. We also need to make sure that SUSE Manager can manage all of your SDI. We're talking a lot about software-defined infrastructure today. SUSE Manager needs to be able to manage it and give you guys the same features that it does at the moment in order to help you transform your data center. Formulas with forms. This is an added feature which is available in SUSE Manager at the moment. It effectively enables you to take a pre-packaged module that we've already got And it's a template wrapper for it. So you could say, deploy a web server, and then within SUSE Manager specify the content of that web server, and then it would go out and push that through. And we've got a demo of that online, which can be seen on YouTube. It goes into a lot more detail than I've got time for here. And that's already available within SUSE Manager. Now, just quickly, talking about scalability and high availability. In terms of scaling with SUSE Manager, we've improved massively over recent versions for performance and scalability but also in terms of HA as well. As SUSE Manager and its subsequent Salt Master becomes one of the most critical pieces of infrastructure in your organization, we need to make sure that it's highly available. And we can work with you to enable that. So, just talks a little bit about that on the slide. Sorry for speeding through. Still got a demo after this as well. Other Linux distributions, so talking about managing Red Hat and CentOS with SUSE Manager. Now, one of the key benefits that our customers sometimes find is if you have SUSE providing your Red Hat update packages, we can compile them and distribute them to you through SUSE Manager. You can save time, but more importantly, you can save money. You then don't have to have a Red Hat satellite subscription as well if you've got the SUSE Manager, because we can push out your updates to both. Now, the other way of doing this is if you don't want to transfer your Red Hat entitlements to us and pay us for your Red Hat subscription, is for you to import the Red Hat repositories directly into SUSE Manager. So SUSE Manager can go out, get the updates from Red Hat directly, and we can import your entitlement certificates directly into SUSE Manager, and then get all the benefits and features we just talked about. So, some more information up there. I've got a demo now to go through, and some next steps on the board as well. It's going to be a very quick demo. Let's give it a go. So I've got my demo notes here now. As I just mentioned, SUSE Manager 3.1 has just entered beta. You can see that. Cool. Let me make it full screen. Check it still works. There we go. So this is SUSE Manager, he says. There we go. Timed out. Cool. So this is the SUSE Manager homepage. Now, for those familiar with Spatial, you'll notice it looks very different. We're running 3.1 beta at the moment. I thought I'd give you guys a preview of that. I like to live on the edge, so to speak. Well, clearly I showed Linus swearing at you, also something on the edge. It's important to note there may be bugs, some things may not work, a demo may break, etc. Not my fault, early beta days, but also importantly, we can get you guys on this beta already. Just speak to myself and we can help get that ball rolling. So, walking through here, got a nice homepage. I can see on the homepage my most critical systems, what have the most fixes, required security fixes, or even system updates available. I can see a history of actions, so kind of see what my sysadmins have been up to potentially, what's gone on, but also some relevant security patches, the most recently released security patches as well. I can see straight here on the homepage a quick one-glance overview. Now, if I go into the systems page, I can see here got 4 systems registered to my SUSE Manager server. If I were to go into one of them, I can see here I've got a CentOS server as well, because I've got Red Hat registered there. I've got SUSE SLES 1 and Service Pack 2 as well. If I go into there, voila. I can see how many updates I've got available. I can see some inventory information. Now, this is information which has been automatically obtained through one of the SALT modules that Thomas was talking about earlier. We can also get extra detail from an external CMDB as well, or you can input it through an external API. SUSE Manager's got a great API as well. So, I can then see what security updates I've got available. I can click in them. I can see, these are the patches available. So these are specific patches that will apply to specific security errata, CVEs. And I can go there, see what's there, see what update packages are provided by a specific patch. Go there we go. So I can see in my SES 12 update, these are the channels, which I was talking about earlier on, the upstream repository, so to speak. I've only got ones registered from the SUSE Customer Center on here. I've got the Red Hat channels. I've got all the updates available that we've pushed out for Red Hat, which is quite a lot. And then all the ones which we've provided for ourselves as well, down here in the repositories. Now, just to show one thing, because we are really running out of time, this is CVE Audit. So who has ever had a manager or someone coming up and saying, oh, I've read about this dirty cow vulnerability on BBC News, I've been on this website, because for some reason vulnerabilities now have websites. Can you tell me if I'm vulnerable? Who's ever had that question? Ask them. Excellent. Good. Now I can go in here, and if I choose one that I wrote down earlier, which is 5195, I think I'd know it off by hand by now, but there we go, audit systems. So I can go in and see, are any of my systems vulnerable to this? Are there patches available for this? So a critical one would be that, say, there's no patch available just yet, but also what systems have been patched. Now I can see here in my, on the 4 systems I got registered, they've already been patched. Everything's good, and obviously not affected, grey. These 2 are new enough, SLES SP2, default installs, to not be vulnerable for it. If I go and choose one random one that does have some vulnerable, okay. Alternatively, I can go through and search through my list of patches directly, bring up relevant list of all patches, so I can see various bug fixes. I've got security enhancements as well, and obviously moderate, severe, etc., based on the CVE, and we can list the CVEs there. I can click on it, go directly to the website, and then go there and get a list of systems available. So I can see here that my CentOS server has got this Red Hat security advisory available for it. I can tick it, I can apply patches, and I can schedule a time for it to go. So if you do have patch windows still, you can schedule them. Click the button, off it goes. That's now being scheduled. Salt's going to pick that up like that and send it to whether it's one system, whether it's 10,000, again, just like that, and they'll all go then install and update for that patch. Another thing that we can do with SUSE Manager, which we find is quite, if I just log into my server there. Can everyone see that? Yep. So, if I just go to, so I've got here SLES 11 SLES 12 SP1 server. There we go. Finding a lot of people now, especially with obviously the new service packs from SAP as well, are being forced to update their old versions of SLES, for example, from SLES 11 SP3 to SP4, to maintain their supportability with SAP. So we can actually do that within SUSE Manager. It's one of its more powerful features. For all of you who've done it before, I'm sure you're aware, you can either normally get the DVD, you may choose to Pixie boot it, but it can be a bit of a pain to go through and do that for each system. If I go through there, I can there see there's my SLES 12 SP1 server. To do a service pack migration now, it's 1 click, that's 2 clicks. There's 3 clicks. I'm just choosing now where am I going to migrate it to. I can see it's now going to go to SLES 12 SP2, and I can choose any additional modules that I wanted to add to it. We talked about modules earlier on. I can then just click Schedule, and then Confirm. Now that now is going to go off and start running the update. And I'll leave that going in the background for us. It'll pick it up soon and go off. It'll calculate what packages it needs and go in and install it. And then subsequently, you can also issue the reboot from SUSE Manager if it's required as well, which obviously for a service pack upgrade, it is. So that can save a lot of time because you can do system groups as a whole. So you could go and migrate all of your development servers with those same 5 or 6 clicks that I just did. Any questions?
Yeah, I had a question about...
You can see in your overview of your system what applications are installed. Are they only RPM based or also SAP, Oracle, and well, proprietary stuff?
Just RPM based at the moment.
Okay. Will you work on the rest?
I believe that is something the product management team are looking into.
If we have some requests, we will
Yeah.
work on it.
But at the moment,
Not so far.
predominantly RPM based. Any other questions? Nope. One just behind.
Do you support any other Linux versions, like
Two.
Okay. So this here is where I need to point out the difference between supported and compatible. So, being based on upstream spacewalk, technically, SUSE Manager can work with anything upstream spacewalk does, which, yes, does include Ubuntu and Debian. So technically, you can import those repositories, you can sync them. If your engineers are able to, they could even grab the patch data and import that as well. What you can't do is phone us for support for it. So it does work, and some people are doing it. We just don't support it.
You mentioned spacework, but I guess it's also doable with Salt, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Is the patches downloaded by the manager or is the minion do it itself?
So what's happened before today is the SUSE Manager server, it almost acts as it's a giant proxy. So it's gone in advance, downloaded all of the packages, and it does that routinely. Many points throughout the day, it will check in and see if there's any updates available for the products that I've synced. So product could be SLES 12 SP2. It's synced that, it's got all of those updates ready to go. Then the minion systems will download those patches from SUSE Manager server directly. So one of the things we often find is that customers are using it to help them get around firewall rules. So they could put the SUSE Manager server in the DMZ, for example, they let the client systems just talk to SUSE Manager, then the client systems don't need internet access or access through the proxy server. Okay, another question?
Oh, more questions. Are there plans to support any hardware? Because this is all software related, but at the end of the day, there is still hardware which is running this.
So when you say hardware, what would you...
BIOS, firmware, things like that.
Okay, so in terms of BIOS and firmware, obviously a lot of systems can deliver those at present through RPM and obviously HPE as well. You're able to update a lot of the firmware through normal RPM. So yes, those can be imported into SUSE Manager, but direct access straight onto the servers, we do support bare metal provisioning, for example, to provision new servers via Pixie Boot. But in terms of managing the BIOS and things like that, it does Salt.
So from a Salt perspective, we have recently added also support for directly talking to Hewlett-Packard and Dell chassis for most of their HC or hyper-converged infrastructure systems, as well as there's, let's see, a couple of other systems inside of Salt for talking to, let's see, like Cisco switches, or if you have Juniper switches. Juniper just released a platform that they call Jedi, which is also completely integrated, which is based entirely on Salt. So you can use Salt to directly communicate with those. Similarly, with the Salt backplane inside of SUSE Manager, as was quite eloquently mentioned before, that does mean that since you can expose these pieces of hardware as minions, then they should be compatible with SUSE Manager.
So yes, so you'll be able to see them as client systems within the SUSE Manager user interface. At the moment, though, you wouldn't see any details about them. But in the future, yes, we're looking at adding that in. We've recently brought in a new visualization feature, which is in 3.1 now. On my end, unfortunately, I can't see much with it simply because I've got a very simple demo environment set up. There, where's it gone? It's hidden. Something's under systems. There we go. It's a visualization. So what we're looking to do ultimately with SUSE Manager is aim to provide you with a single pane of glass. Now, at the moment, I've just got one SUSE Manager server with a couple of clients. So I've got, in terms of infrastructure management servers, nothing else there. But if you had other SUSE Manager servers or proxy servers or SALT proxies, you'd be able to see them here, move them around, search by them, and then further on into the future, I know they want to add things like switches and chassis as well into that from a viewing perspective. So that will be something which will improve over time. Okay. Any other questions? Cool. So, obviously I've talked about SALT. Now, how do you use it within SUSE Manager? Now, we've got this new onboarding page. Onboarding, this is where, as Thomas talked about earlier, SALT being key pair based, we'd see all of the keys. If I installed the minions on the client and then pointed them towards a SUSE Manager server, I'd be able to see their keys here and accept or reject those keys. And this is how you could prevent, say, a malicious device from being able to see your SALT server or communicate with it in some way. You could block out through here. I'm using a different way to register a client systems on this environment because it's new for us. In the past, you'd have to build a repository, install some packages, and then point them towards the SUSE Manager server. But the SUSE Manager server can now bootstrap clients directly. And there's two ways that we can go about this. So if I go to put SLES SP2, just go in as root. Disable key checking. Now, I'm choosing to manage the system completely via SSH. Now, some companies, whether it's... that's why I've already got it on there, so just delete it and go again. Because some companies, for example, just due to security policy, they may not be able to go off and install SALT on the systems, or maybe due to licensing or whatever reason. This enables us to manage systems directly via SSH, and it uses a combination of SALT SSH. I believe at the moment what we do is copy temporarily a version of the SALT minion client onto the minion and then run it locally on there directly through something called SALT call, and then it reports the results back up. Or traditionally, I could use this tool to go and install SALT on the client. And you can, at the moment, obviously this is one server at a time, but we're looking through the API for you to be able to import CSVs, for example, or reports of systems, or again, directly have that linked with your CMDB, so you import the data from the CMDB, off it goes, and provisions SALT on them all. Just tie it to that, there we go. Now this is just going to go off, take a look at the system, copy the SALT agent to it directly, SALT minion client, run it, and then report back up, and then I'll be able to see it in my Systems tab. Question?
Regarding the Systems tab and the CMDB, can you add a bunch of fields of your own you consider relevant?
You can. So if I go to one of my clients, I can create custom info. At the moment, I've not got any custom values, so I can create custom key values and then assign them to specific systems or create a custom one per system as well. And then you can also query that data subsequently as well.
Okay, so it will look like another field in the...
What it will look like is on here, yes, on the overview page, it would just be an extra field in here for my name, then value. But also, like I said, you can expose that through the API as well. What I'm going to show is applying a state to a system. Thomas talked about it earlier on. So this is one of the new things with SUSE Manager 3. Oh, question?
A question with regard to agentless or agents. Is there a difference in manageability? Are there like disk usage? Is that?
SSH would be the main overhead with using agentless, because if you use obviously with the Salt Minion agent, everything's going over the 0MQ bus, very lightweight, very efficient. Whereas if you're doing it without the agent, it's doing it over SSH.
Oh, okay, but there are no functionality differences. There's no limitation with the agent or with the, oh, sorry.
From a SUSE manager perspective, as it stands through everything we can do through the web interface, no. But Thomas is going to say some of the Salt differences.
Yeah, so one of the things that I mentioned before was the event system. When you're running over Salt SSH, you don't, I mean, because what Salt SSH is doing is that it copies what we call the Salt thin tarball down to the target system, and then runs it in an isolated environment under var temp, and then optionally just completely removes it all. But so there's no daemon that's running that's actively looking for events or things like that. And so that's the main thing that you lose from a functionality perspective. Otherwise, yeah, it's performance. Salt itself is roughly 2 orders of magnitude faster than Salt SSH.
Cool. Any other questions? Super. So what I've created on my SUSE Manager server is a custom state inside my own state catalog. It's very simple. Install HTTPD, the Apache. If I wanted to apply that to my Red Hat base system, go there, and it's as simple as I go to states. I can then go to custom. This is where my custom states are stored. I'm going to search my catalog. I could obviously type in there if I wanted to. First of all, what I can do is I can either assign a state to a system so that links are to it's always going to be present, or I can just manually apply it to a system. So I could apply, then save, or just save. Save would just apply that state the one time. So then I go to apply, and then save. That's now going to go off, install HTTPD on the CentOS system. Obviously, that's a very simple state. Things can go a lot more complex, and you can do all sorts of really cool things with Salt, but we could go on for hours just about that. So that's 3 very simple, quick things that we can do with SUSE Manager, just because of time. Any questions? I am around at lunch as well.
I think
So
you're
feel
well
free
done.
to-
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.